The text came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Grandma Rose is in the hospital. It doesn't look good. I was already awake, working late in my home office in San Francisco, reviewing acquisition proposals for my investment fund. The message was from my cousin Derek, and for a moment my heart stopped. Grandma Rose had been the one constant source of love and support in my family for 32 years. She was the only one who had never questioned my choices, never made me feel inadequate, never treated me like an outsider. I immediately called Derek back. "How bad is it?" I asked without preamble. "Pretty bad. Heart failure. The doctors aren't optimistic." His voice was strained, exhausted. "Which hospital?" "I'll catch the next flight to Phoenix." There was a pause. "Actually, Natalie, maybe you should wait a day or two. See how things develop." "Wait. Derek, she's my grandmother too." "I know, but, look, the whole family is here. Mom, Dad, Uncle Jim, Aunt Carol, all the cousins. It's a lot of people, and the hospital has limits on visitors. Plus, you know how stressed Grandma gets when there's family tension." Family tension. The euphemism my relatives used to describe the fact that they'd spent the last decade treating me like a disappointment and an embarrassment. It had started when I dropped out of law school 10 years ago to pursue what they called computer stuff. While my cousins were becoming lawyers, doctors, and accountants, I was building what looked to them like a hobby business, buying and selling websites. They'd watched me work from coffee shops and spare bedrooms, living modestly while they established traditional careers and started families. What they didn't know was that my computer stuff had evolved into Phoenix Digital Holdings, a $2.8 billion investment fund specializing in technology acquisitions. I'd been quietly building an empire while they assumed I was still struggling to find direction. I'd kept my success private for good reasons. The few times I'd tried to share business wins with family, they'd either minimized my achievements or found ways to make them about themselves. When I'd bought my first building in San Francisco, Aunt Carol had suggested I was getting ahead of myself financially. When I'd mentioned closing a particularly large deal, Uncle Jim had lectured me about the dot-com bubble and the importance of real assets. So I'd learned to keep quiet. I lived in a modest apartment when I visited Phoenix, drove a sensible car, and let them maintain their assumptions about my financial situation. It was easier than dealing with their judgment and unwanted advice. But this was different. This was Grandma Rose. "Derek, I understand about hospital restrictions, but I need to see her. She's been asking about me, hasn't she?" Another pause. "Well, she's been pretty sedated." "Has she asked for me?" "Natalie, let's just see how the next day goes, okay? If she improves, then of course you should come visit." I hung up feeling confused and hurt. Something in Derek's tone suggested this wasn't just about hospital capacity or Grandma's medical condition. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Jessica. "Don't come to the hospital, family only. She doesn't need stress." Family only. As if I wasn't family. As if my presence would somehow harm the woman who had loved me unconditionally my entire life. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to understand what was really happening. Then I called the hospital directly. "Phoenix General Hospital, how can I help you?" "I'm calling about my grandmother, Rose Martinez. She was admitted yesterday with heart failure." "Let me check." "Yes, Mrs. Martinez is in our cardiac intensive care unit. Are you calling for visiting information?" "Yes, I'd like to know about visiting hours and any restrictions." "Visiting hours are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., with up to 4 visitors at a time. Would you like me to connect you to the nursing station?" "For visitors at a time. Not family only. No additional visitors." The pieces fell into place. My family hadn't excluded me because of hospital restrictions or medical concerns. They'd excluded me because they wanted me excluded. I sat in my office for another hour, processing the hurt and anger. Then I made a decision. If I couldn't visit Grandma Rose in person, I'd make sure she knew I was thinking about her in a way that would be impossible to ignore. I called my assistant Maria despite the early hour. "Maria, I need you to arrange a flower delivery to Phoenix General Hospital for this morning. The biggest, most beautiful arrangement you can find." "Of course. What's the occasion?" "My grandmother is in the ICU. I want her to know she's loved." "I'll take care of it immediately. Anything specific you'd like on the card?" "Just, with all my love, Natalie. You are everything good in this world." "Beautiful. I'll have them delivered within the hour." But as I hung up, I realized flowers weren't enough. If my family wanted to play games about who belonged and who didn't, I was ready to show them exactly what belonging looked like. I made another call, this time to David Chin, my lawyer and one of the few people who knew the true scope of my business holdings. David, I need to make a donation to Phoenix General Hospital. Today. How much are we talking about? $500,000. Specifically targeted toward their cardiac care unit. That's a substantial donation, Natalie. For tax purposes, you'll want to structure it properly. Handle whatever paperwork is necessary. But I want the donation process today, and I want it designated for immediate improvements to patient care in the cardiac ICU. Any specific improvements? I thought about Grandma Rose lying in some standard hospital room while my family controlled access to her like she was their property. Private rooms. Enhanced monitoring equipment. Whatever would provide the highest level of comfort and care for cardiac patients. I'll contact the hospital's development office immediately. An hour later, Maria called back. The flowers have been delivered. Absolutely gorgeous arrangement. White roses, lilies, and orchids. The florist said it was one of the largest arrangements they'd ever created. Thank you, Maria. Also, I spoke with the delivery driver. He said the nursing staff was very impressed and that the patient's room looked like a garden. I smiled for the first time since receiving Derek's text. At least Grandma would know someone was thinking about her. Around noon, David called with an update. The donation has been processed. Phoenix General's development director was thrilled. Apparently this is the largest single donation they've received this year. What did they say about the cardiac ICU improvements? Interesting development there. They said they'd been wanting to upgrade their VIP suite but hadn't had the funding. Your donation will allow them to convert it to a state-of-the-art cardiac care room with private nursing, enhanced monitoring, and all the amenities of a luxury hotel room. Perfect. They also asked if you'd like any recognition for the donation. A plaque, naming rights, that sort of thing. No public recognition. But I do want them to notify the family of the patient in ICU room. What room is my grandmother in? Let me check the records. Room 314. I want them to notify the family in room 314 that due to a generous donation, enhanced care options are now available. That afternoon my phone started buzzing with calls and texts from Phoenix. I ignored them, focusing on work while occasionally smiling at the thought of my family trying to process what was happening. Around 6 p.m. Derek called. This time I answered. Natalie, what the hell is going on? I'm not sure what you mean. The hospital just moved Grandma to some kind of VIP suite. Private nurses, gourmet meals, a room that looks like a 5-star hotel. They said it was made possible by a major donation to the cardiac unit. That sounds wonderful. I'm sure Grandma will be more comfortable. Natalie, this suite probably costs thousands of dollars per day. Who paid for this? I have no idea. Maybe someone wanted to ensure cardiac patients receive the best possible care. The hospital administrator mentioned a $500,000 donation. Natalie, do you know anything about this? I was quiet for a moment, letting him work it out. The flowers, he said slowly. Those weren't just flowers. Derek, you told me not to come to the hospital because it was family only. So I sent flowers instead. You donated $500,000? I wanted to make sure Grandma was comfortable. Silence on the other end. Natalie, where did you get that kind of money? The same place I've been getting money for the past 10 years while you all assumed I was struggling. But you work with computers. You live in that small apartment. Derek, I own a $2.8 billion investment fund. The small apartment is where I stay when I visit Phoenix because it's convenient, not because it's all I can afford. More silence. $2.8 billion? That's the current value of Phoenix Digital Holdings, yes. You're a billionaire? I'm an investor who's had some success in the technology sector. I could hear voices in the background. Apparently Derek was sharing this information with other family members in real time. Natalie, we had no idea. You had no idea because you never asked. Every time I tried to share anything about my work, someone would change the subject or make a comment about how I needed to get serious about my career. But if you'd known what, Derek? Would you have treated me differently? Would you have suddenly decided I was worthy of being called family? That's not. We always considered you family. Did you? Because this morning you told me not to come to the hospital because it was family only. You made it clear that my presence would somehow harm Grandma. We were just trying to manage the situation. You were trying to control who had access to our grandmother. You decided I wasn't important enough to be included in her final days. Derek was quiet for a long moment. She's been asking for you, he admitted finally. What? Grandma. She's been asking where you are when you're coming to visit. We told her you were busy with work. I felt tears starting. You told her I was too busy to visit her. We thought it would be easier than explaining the family dynamics. The family dynamics? Derek, the only family dynamic here is that you all decided I wasn't worth including, and you used Grandma's illness as an excuse to exclude me. Natalie, please. We made a mistake. Can you come now? She really wants to see you. I looked at my calendar. I could be on a plane to Phoenix within 2 hours. I'll be there tonight. Should we tell her you're coming? Tell her I've been trying to visit since yesterday, but some family members thought it would be better if I stayed away. Natalie. Tell her I love her and that I'll be there soon. I hung up and immediately called my pilot. James, I need to get to Phoenix tonight. How quickly can you have the jet ready? Give me 90 minutes, Ms. Martinez. As the plane lifted off from San Francisco, I thought about the last 10 years of family gatherings where I'd been treated like a charity case or an embarrassment. Holidays where my cousins would share their career achievements while I sat quietly, knowing that my computer stuff was generating more revenue than all their professions combined, but unable to share that without being accused of showing off. The irony was that I'd made my fortune specifically by understanding value that others missed. I'd built my investment fund by recognizing potential in technologies and companies that traditional investors dismissed as unimportant or unprofitable. It was the same skill I'd apparently needed to apply to my own family relationships. When I arrived at Phoenix General at 10 p.m., the VIP suite was impressive. Grandma Rose was in a spacious private room with floor-to-ceiling windows, professional-grade cardiac monitoring equipment, and a seating area that looked like a luxury hotel lobby. 2 private nurses were monitoring her condition, and the room was filled with my massive flower arrangement. But what I noticed most was how small and frail she looked in the large hospital bed. Grandma, I said softly, taking her hand. Her eyes opened slowly, then widened when she saw me. Natalie, my beautiful girl, you came. Of course I came. I wanted to be here yesterday, but there was some confusion about visiting restrictions. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Derek said you were too busy with work to visit. Derek was wrong. I've been worried sick about you. This room, she said, looking around in wonder. It's like something from a movie. The nurses said someone made a special donation so I could have the best care. You deserve the best care, Grandma. But who would do such a thing? It must have cost a fortune. I smiled and squeezed her hand. Someone who loves you very much. She studied my face for a moment, and I could see understanding dawning in her eyes. Natalie. Yes, Grandma. Your computer work. It's been going well? Very well. She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen since entering the room. I always knew you were special. Even when you were little, you saw things differently than everyone else. We talked for 2 hours before the nurses insisted she needed rest. I promised to return first thing in the morning, and she made me promise to bring pictures of my apartment in San Francisco. The real apartment, not the small place I stayed in when visiting Phoenix. As I walked back to the hotel, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts from family members. Word had apparently spread about both the donation and my actual financial situation. Derek, can we talk tomorrow? I think there are some things we need to discuss. Jessica, I had no idea about your success. I'm sorry about the text. Uncle Jim, very impressive business you've built. Would love to hear more about it. Aunt Carol, we should have a family dinner while you're in town. I turned off my phone without responding to any of them. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital to find Derek and Jessica waiting in the VIP suite sitting area while Grandma slept. Natalie, Derek stood as I entered. We need to apologize. For what specifically? For excluding you. For assuming we knew what was best. For treating you like you weren't important enough to be here. Jessica nodded. We were wrong. And we're sorry. I looked at them both, these cousins who had spent years making me feel like the family failure, now suddenly apologetic because they'd discovered I was wealthy. Are you sorry because you excluded me, or because you found out I could afford to donate $500,000 to a hospital? Derek shifted uncomfortably. We're sorry because we hurt you. But would you be apologizing if you still thought I was struggling financially? Neither of them answered immediately. That's what I thought, I said quietly. Natalie, Jessica said finally, we know we've made mistakes. But we're family. Isn't there a way to move forward? I looked through the glass partition at Grandma Rose, still sleeping peacefully in her private room surrounded by my flowers and the best cardiac care money could buy. Jessica, for 10 years, you've all treated me like an embarrassment. You've minimized my work, dismissed my achievements, and made it clear that I didn't measure up to your standards of success. Yesterday, when the person I love most in this family was dying, you actively prevented me from seeing her. We made a mistake. You made a choice. You decided I wasn't worth including in Grandma's final days. The only reason you're apologizing now is because you discovered that excluding me might not be in your best financial interests going forward. Derek started to protest, but I held up my hand. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to spend every possible moment with Grandma for as long as she has left. I'm going to make sure she receives the best possible care regardless of cost. And I'm going to show her the respect and love she deserves. And us? Jessica asked quietly. You can earn your way back into my life the same way I earned my success, through consistent actions over time, not through apologies motivated by financial revelations. Grandma Rose lived for another 6 days. I spent every visiting hour with her, sharing stories about my real life in San Francisco, showing her pictures of my actual apartment and my offices, and telling her about the companies I'd built and the technologies I'd invested in. She was fascinated by everything, asking detailed questions about artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and biotech innovations. At 87 years old, she had a sharper understanding of emerging technologies than most of my family members half her age. I always knew you were going to change the world, she told me on her last day. You just saw possibilities that other people couldn't see. When she passed peacefully that Thursday evening, I was holding her hand. The VIP suite was filled with her favorite flowers, white roses that I'd had delivered fresh every day, and the sunset through the floor-to-ceiling windows painted the room in golden light. The funeral was held the following Saturday. I paid for everything: the service, the reception, the catering, and a donation to her church in her memory. I also established the Rose Martinez Education Fund, providing scholarships for students pursuing careers in technology. My family attended the service, of course. They were polite and grateful for my financial support, but there was an underlying awkwardness. They knew they'd revealed their true priorities when they'd excluded me from Grandma's bedside, and they knew I'd responded with a generosity they didn't deserve. During the reception, Uncle Jim approached me. Natalie, I wanted to thank you for everything you did for Mom. The hospital care, the funeral arrangements, everything. I did it for Grandma, not for the family. I understand. But I also wanted to say that we've all learned something from this experience. What's that? That we misjudged you. Badly. And that our assumptions about success and value were wrong. I looked around the reception, seeing my cousins and aunts and uncles mingling with Grandma's friends, many of whom had thanked me for ensuring she was comfortable in her final days. Uncle Jim, the problem isn't that you misjudged my financial situation. The problem is that your respect and inclusion was conditional on wealth and status instead of love and family bonds. How do we fix that? You start by treating people with dignity regardless of their bank account balance. You include family members because they're family, not because they might be useful to you. And you learn to value character over financial achievement. And us. Is there a way for us to rebuild this relationship? I thought about Grandma Rose's last words to me. You just saw possibilities that other people couldn't see. Maybe, I said finally. But it's going to take time. And it's going to require you to prove that you've actually learned something, not just that you want access to someone with money. As I flew back to San Francisco that evening, I thought about the family I'd lost and the family I'd gained. I'd lost relatives who valued money over relationships, but I'd gained a final week with the one person who had always loved me unconditionally. Grandma Rose had seen my potential when I was 5 years old in building elaborate structures with blocks. She'd encouraged my curiosity when I was 15 in learning to code. And she'd celebrated my successes when I was 25 in making my first major investments. She'd never needed to see my bank account to know I was worth loving. 2 months later, Derek called me. "Natalie, I wanted you to know that Jessica and I have been volunteering with the Rose Martinez Education Fund." "That's nice." "We've been working with scholarship recipients, helping them with interview skills and professional development. It's been educational." "How so?" "These kids remind me of you at their age. Smart, ambitious, but from backgrounds that our family would have looked down on. I'm starting to understand how wrong we were about what matters." It was a start. "Derek, I appreciate that you're learning. But understanding your mistakes and changing your behavior are two different things." "I know. That's why I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I'm just letting you know that we're working on it." For the first time since Grandma's death, I smiled. "Keep working on it. Grandma would be proud of you for that." Some flowers, it turns out, plant seeds that grow into something much more valuable than their original beauty. And sometimes, the most expensive gifts aren't the ones that cost the most money. They're the ones that cost the most in personal growth and change.